time for the best coverage of the top stories in sports. The Sports Wrap with Jason Page starts now.
Yes, it does. Thank you, Chad Erickson, and great to have you with us on this Thursday edition of the show. Feels like a Monday because we were theoretically off on Tuesday and Wednesday, so it feels like it should be a Monday, but it's a Thursday because I hate this time of the year doing fragmented weeks like this. It's hard to get into a rhythm. Doing a show every day, it's like anything else. You get into a rhythm. There's a feel. There's a flow. And when you're off for as long as we have been off, it can be challenging getting back into it. And you're on, you're off, you're on, you're off. So we are back today. Kurt Helin will join us, Pro Basketball Talk at NBCSports.com. Get his thoughts on everything we missed throughout the holidays in the NBA. A few big ticket items to get to with him as well. We start things out in the world of football and in college football. Sam Yarnell is here, as he is each and just about every day on the show. So we had 3 of the 4 college football playoff games played. They'll play the Sugar Bowl on Thursday afternoon. By the time you've seen this show, in fact, the game's probably already been played, unless you were taking the podcast version of the show, which comes out first every day. The game's probably already been played. We will recap that game on Friday. The Sugar Bowl postponed today because of the awful terrorist attack, the horrific terrorist attack on New Year's morning in New Orleans on Bourbon Street. Our thoughts and prayers, our hearts go out to you, New Orleans. We are with you. As of the taping of this show, 15 people lost their lives in that attack. It is just unthinkable to have woken up to that on New Year's Day. But they decided to postpone the game one day. We'll get into that a little bit more coming up in odds and ends. But let's talk about the games, Sam, that were played, because that is what we are here to do. Ohio State. I mean, look, what is there? I mean, will we look back when this playoff is done? Will we look back on that loss to Michigan, as embarrassing as some people thought it was at the time? By the way, Michigan beat Alabama too a couple of days ago. So how about if you're Michigan finishing your season with a win against Ohio State and a win against Alabama? I mean, it's kind of a mind, well, you could fill in the blank. But Ohio State just did a number on Oregon yesterday, Sam.
Yeah, they did. And Jason, it was exactly what Bill Bender has talked to us about this Ohio State team so much this season, yeah. and their real danger, and that is Quinshad Judkins and Tre'Davion Henderson. And they were out to play yesterday. The boys were having a good time. I like it. It was awesome to see. It kind of sucked, though. Like, I don't know. Maybe it's just the era in which I grew up. I always think of the Rose Bowl, obviously this being the first time it was a college football playoff game. I always think of the Rose Bowl as kind of always a good game, right? Like whenever there's a game at the Rose Bowl, you always kind of expect it to be a good game. Yeah. I want to say like there was a TCU game in the mid-2010s that was a blowout, but it feels like other than that, they've generally all been pretty close. I say that because when I see the Rose Bowl, the immediate memory that I have in my head is that famous USC Penn State game, the Saquon Barkley Penn State team against the Juju Smith-Schuster USC team in that Rose Bowl stadium that went to like 3 overtimes, and the final score was like 51-46 or something like that, 45, I should say. But regardless, Ohio State is here to play. They have shown you exactly why the number remained what it did on them to win the national championship, despite them being the 8 seed, right? Despite them losing to Michigan, despite them not competing for the Big Ten championship, they were still a top 4 favorite to win the national championship this whole time. And they showed you exactly why last night.
Sam, at the end of the day, Oregon had minus 23 yards rushing in this game. I mean, that's just, I know, look, I know it's a team that's, pass heavy and all, minus 23 yards rushing in the game. I mean, that's remarkable when you think about it. And I know some of that was Dylan Gabriel and everything. I get it. But still, They could get nothing going on the ground. Ohio State, Will Howard played a good game. 181 yards rushing in the game for Ohio State. So they move on to play in the semifinals. A thought from there on what we saw between Texas and Arizona State, because now Ohio State will get a rematch with Texas. And those two teams met up in what turned out to be a classic. I actually turned the game off early fourth quarter thinking it was over. And then all of a sudden I got an alert on my phone saying, you better come back and watch, because it became a thriller in two overtimes with Arizona State coming up just short. And throughout much of this game, I'm sitting there going, you know what, Arizona State not ready for prime time. They just looked like a team that wasn't ready for prime time throughout much of this game. Couldn't get the ball across the end into the end zone. Fourth down, some of the play calling was suspect down deep in the red zone. And they made a game of it, Sam, and Texas certainly got a scare.
I think when we're talking about this Arizona State team, and that was a very prevailing thought process, right? With a lot of people who did not watch a lot of Arizona State football this year, were like, all right, this game's at halftime, and it's 17-3, and Texas dominated the whole first half. It was like, I think it was Arizona State scored on their opening possession, and then were like shut out the rest of the half, and I don't think they got more than like 3 first downs the rest of the half. All of that said, this Arizona State team all year prided themselves on having an electric offense and then their defense not being great, but stepping up when it needed to. That is exactly what happened in this Peach Bowl yesterday. They stepped up in a massive way. Granted, you get bailed out there at the very end with the Texas kicker doinking it off the left upright, no question. But listen, the performance that Cam Scoutaboo put on out of that backfield last night rose his draft stock about 15 positions. He went from being a late first rounder to a mid to early first rounder yesterday. And we're talking about a running back. That doesn't happen very much anymore. The Arizona State team deserves a lot of credit. Texas is a very good school, but what they did late in that game and the way that team stepped up, aside from one bad throw from Sam Levitt at the very, very end of the second overtime, it's remarkable stuff. And I think it's something that this Arizona State team can hang their hat on for this season.
Yeah, I agree. They definitely made a game of it. They could have easily laid down at multiple points in that game, and they did not. So Penn State, Boise State, they did what they needed to do, Penn State, in shutting down Ashton Jeanty to the extent they did. They'll get the winner of that Notre Dame Georgia matchup being played later on Thursday. We'll have a recap of that on tomorrow's show. When we return, a big decision in Philadelphia revolving around Saquon Barkley. We'll get into it next. We welcome you back to this Thursday edition of the show. Coming up in 10 minutes, it'll be Kurt Helin. Pro basketball talk at NBCSports.com is his jam. Get his thoughts on everything we missed throughout the Christmas holiday New Year's break. What's going on with Jimmy Butler? Terrible injury for one up-and-coming NBA star as well. We'll talk about that with Kurt and a whole bunch more. But we got to talk about what's going on with Saquon Barkley, because the Philadelphia Eagles made a decision. Matter of fact, I have a column coming out, an op-ed over on MSNBC.com, which you'll be able to see probably sometime later on Thursday or Friday. Shameless plug. But Sam Yarnell, the Eagles made the decision to sit Saquon Barkley. And look, to me, Sam, it's a no-brainer. This is easy for me. And again, I try to take the emotion out of this stuff. And I'm an attorney, and I could argue both sides of anything. But here's the reality. Let's say he goes in and gets the record. It's a 17-game record, not a 16-game record. His opportunity to break the record was actually last week, and he couldn't do it. And look, it would have been asking a lot, obviously, for him to break the record last week. So he has 2,005 yards. He's 101 yards short of breaking the record, 100 short of tying it. So even if he breaks the record, it's going to come with some sort of context about the record in 16 games versus the record in 17 games. It's a different record. It's not even the same record. That's one. Two, Eagles had a bye in week 5. They've played 12 straight games. They're not winning a Super Bowl without a healthy Saquon Barkley. To me, That's an easy decision. Then you throw on top of that the pressure on Nick Sirianni for this team and for him to go at least deep into this postseason and make a run. To me, this is a no-brainer. This is an easy decision. You sit Saquon Barkley for the better good of the team. And honestly, I like the way he's handled it and the way he's talked about it. I think he's been very professional in the way he's dealing with the situation. And I think Nick Sirianni, who anybody who's watched this show knows, I have been as critical of as anybody when it comes to the way he handles the media, when it comes to the way he's just handled certain situations surrounding this team. I'm as critical of anybody. But this is the right decision, Sam. I want to get your thoughts on that here in just a moment. But first, got to talk about our friends at Credit Associates. Who do you think will be the Super Bowl MVP this year? Maybe Josh Allen. He's certainly at the top of the list. Lamar Jackson, perhaps. Saquon Barkley should be in the conversation, but ultimately he is not. What if you could be the MVP of your finances? With Credit Associates, you can. They'll help you settle your credit card debt for up to half of what you owe. That's like scoring a game-winning touchdown, but for your wallet. So take the first step forward towards financial glory. Call 1-800-747-5362 today. Credit Associates, because every MVP needs a winning team. To see if you qualify for debt relief, call 1-800-747-5362 or visit creditassociates.com, or you can just click the QR code on the screen and go check it out for yourself. Our friends with Credit Associates. All right, Sam, what do you think of the decision from Nick Sirianni?
I think it's an interesting dichotomy, right? Because it does truly seem like everyone was record obsessed in terms of Saquon Barkley. Everyone, narrative-wise, was record obsessed, right? Like that was the entire thing all season long is, oh my gosh, he's going to break Eric Dickerson's record. And oh my gosh, he's got to be in the MVP conversation because he's going to have over 2,000 yards and break Eric Dickerson's record. And then immediately when he crossed 2,000 yards, like immediately, the play that he crossed 2,000 yards, the tweets popped up on the timeline. Well, if he goes for another 106 yards or whatever it is, 2106 to get past Eric Dickerson's record. Oh, well, it's going to be a 17-game season. And, oh, well, it's not the same as Eric Dickerson doing it. So that's when you kind of knew that whole conversation was done. That's when you could kind of tell that, all right, Saquon Barkley's not winning the MVP because everyone's going to try and justify breaking a record that, as we always say in sports, what are records made to be? Broken.
It's been 40 years though, and nobody's broken that record. I mean,
listen, the NFL rushing record truly is one of the more impressive ones in that it hasn't been broken. I think that we in the media massively oversell the importance of it and give way more credit to running backs who are good than the great Hall of Fame end-to-end offensive lines that they run behind. And I mean, you go down the list of these 2,000-yard rushers, every single one of them, all-pro offensive line, all-pro offensive line, all-pro offensive line, Derrick Henry, all-pro offensive line.
Hang on. Did Barry Sanders ever get to 2,000?
Barry Sanders got, only once, actually, surprisingly.
Well,
Barry Sanders
only
got to
9 times
in 1997. He retired so young.
Only 9
to think that
only 9 times. Only 9 times it happened. His run, he might be the exception on offensive lines because he did a lot of dancing to try and get those 2,000 yards. I don't look at the end of all of this. It's funny. I went and looked at Eric Dickerson's numbers. And if you take his numbers and match them up to Saquon's, they're pretty darn close. I think he averages about a half yard more per carry. The amount of carries is relatively the same. I mean, the numbers are pretty darn close when you match the two up. I also think we glorified the running back position a lot more than it is today. There has been a renaissance, don't get me wrong. There's been a renaissance at the position here over the last couple of years. But ultimately, it was obviously something that was appreciated and valued and leaned on more heavily 20, 30 years ago than it has been obviously over the last 10 or 15 years. But you agree, this is a no-brainer to sit him. I mean, you got to get him the week of rest.
I mean, for all the reasons you stated and more, like if Nick Sirianni, so many different things, the top of the list being the Eagles. There's no way the Eagles want to win this game. There is no real way, and this is what's so interesting about all these division games in the last week of the season. There are a few teams this week, and there is no way they want to win this week. The Eagles, the Bills, all these teams who are playing teams in their division that have top 3 pick aspirations, you want to do everything you can to get your division rival out of the top 5 in terms of draft capital. So I'm going to say the Eagles lose this game, and I'll even be more forward with it, Jason. I'll spoil Page versus the Prince tomorrow a little bit. I'm going to be on the Patriots, and I'm going to be on the Giants money lines this week because I think both the Bills and the Eagles have smart front offices that understand the implications for the greater good of losing one meaningless game at the end of a season.
Yeah, I think both of them do the right thing as it relates to their team. I thought the Eagles were smart here in doing what they do. I think the Chiefs will be smart in terms of what they do as well. And I think there's some strategy there with the Chiefs too, in not wanting the Bengals in the postseason. And with Miami starting, Scoop Huntley, there's a possibility Miami loses that game. So Cincinnati's certainly rooting hard for the Carson Wentz-led Chiefs. We're coming back with Kurt Helin. Continuing on this Thursday edition of Sports Wrap, plowing ahead, still under the weather. Over 2 weeks I have been sick, but we're going to get through it. And Kurt Helin's going to help us get through it with some NBA talk. Get us caught up on all the action that we missed over the last several days. Kurt, for once I could actually justify starting with the New York Knicks, who, I don't care what the standings say, have the longest winning streak right now in the NBA, Kurt Helin. They have won 9 in a row after a win against the Jazz on New Year's Day. Technically, the Thunder have a 12-game winning streak, but they actually lost a game during that winning streak, which means they don't have a 12-game winning streak because that
game doesn't count. It's a magical ether NBA Cup game, right?
I don't get it. Karl Anthony Towns goes for 30 and 20. First Knicks since Patrick Ewing. Above my head, that is a Patrick Ewing signed basketball, by the way. My favorite player of all time. Patrick Ewing, the last Knick to do that. And boy, how do we explain just how well Karl Anthony Towns has fit in here?
Yeah, it took a little bit, didn't it? But he's come around, and they're really clicking on offense. I mean, they are battling the Cavaliers for the best offense in the league, kind of back and forth occasionally. And I think Cleveland's on top right now, but they're right there, and they're playing.
It's so crazy to say that about a Knicks team, that we're talking about them as the best offense in the league.
And the floor spacing, the guys getting downhill, it just everything opened up with Randall out and Towns in. And by the way, go watch the Minnesota games and see the inverse, right? Like see things get clogged up just a little. I mean, they're still a solid team, but their offense is clogged, and it's not that way. It's flowing, it's open. There's lanes for guys to get downhill. Brunson is having a fantastic, all NBA / consider me for your MVP ballot kind of season. It's really been good, but what's keyed this winning streak for you guys? They've actually been a top 10 defense over these 9 games. They're getting stops like we expect from a Thibodeau team. If they can defend at even an above average level with this offense, they become a real playoff threat.
Yeah, I don't know how anybody could say otherwise right now with what we've seen out of them here. Is there anything else where you see them having a need to address here as we get towards the trade deadline where they could even make a move?
It's possible, but I'm not sure. Look, you're not a name you're hearing a lot on the trade, of the teams really kind of looking to make a move. The Lakers were and still are. There's certain teams you kind of hear out there. Phoenix is looking around. Golden State's looking around. But in the case of New York, they're not. Look, they've got a good team, and I think they'd make a move if it's there. I'm just not sure. Look, every team could use more shooting. They could use depth off the bench and shooting. And maybe that's out there for
drives
a second.
Me nuts, man. They play 8 guys. It's 8 guys, and the 3 off the bench are playing very few minutes. It drives me nuts when we get to the end of the year. I cringe.
Well, that's the concern, and that's where trying to force some depth. Sometimes as a GM, you have to come in and make moves that force your coach to do something. I'm not sure. I'm not sure how you do that with Thibodeau, but you in minutes. But you've got to put some more. So I don't say got to, but you really more depth off that bench, a chance to rest some of those starters, especially down the stretch, so that your legs aren't wobbly and kind of noodles when you get to the playoffs is going to matter. It's just getting some guys some rest. At least they're looking like a top 6 seed.
Oh, top 6, top 3, Kurt.
Yeah, well, they're top 3 right now, but as long as you stay in the top 6, you get that whole almost a week off between games when the season ends.
True.
You got to go through the in-season tournament before you not in-season tournament, the
play-in tournament
before you start. So you get some time there, but more time would be better.
Pat Riley's playing hardball. I mean, when it comes to this Jimmy Butler situation, there's no way of getting around it at this point. He's basically saying, we're not trading you. Now, I don't know if that's posturing. You would know better than I would. I mean, is he posturing to try and potentially get a better deal? Or is he really just content to make Jimmy Butler ride this out no matter how miserable he is?
He is content to ride this out. The sense around the league when you talk to other front offices is, though, that was largely posturing. That was Pat Riley saying, look, your offers stink. Like, these are just, you can't lowball us into this. We'll just keep him for the rest of the year and deal with this summer. Jimmy Butler's comments to the media where he's like, do you want to be here? I don't know. I don't care. I'm in a happy place. You know, his ambivalent, we'll call them, comments to the media suggested to me a guy who would like to be traded but realizes that's probably not going to happen. It's really hard. Miami can't take back $1 more in a trade than they send out. So it becomes almost impossible to put together one with like Phoenix, where he would like to go. Miami's not going to take Bradley Beal back in his $100 million over 2 more years anyway. But like, it just becomes almost impossible to put together these trades because of the way the apron and tax works. It's probably a summer thing.
How much of this is ego with Pat Riley?
Oh, there certainly is. Everything with Pat Riley has some ego involved, but I also just think it's good business with him. It's not that he wouldn't trade Jimmy Butler if tomorrow the Houston Rockets decided they wanted him and they could step in with a really good offer of young players and picks and stuff. It's just that offer's not on the table, and he's read this long enough, he read the tea leaves and goes, it's not coming. So I'm going to take this stance, and I'm going to sound strong, but the fact of the matter is, again, like I said, people around the league think he'd trade Jimmy Butler tomorrow if somebody gave him an offer, the right offer.
Milwaukee, we were talking about them during the play-in tournament as, hey, look what Milwaukee's doing, and how about the Bucks and sort of the way they're playing and defensively, and then you turn around and they're still 17-14. Kurt, I mean, what are we to make of the Bucks 31 games in?
They're okay. They're good. When they get everybody together and it clicks, they can be very good for a stretch. But after the in-season tournament, where we're like, this looks like a team who can be a threat at the top of the East. Until their last game, the first 5 games out of that break, they were either without Giannis Antetokounmpo or Damian Lillard. They just, again, you've got to keep those guys on the floor healthy and together. And then, things can kind of come together. But at this point, they're going to be a mid-pack team in the East. They're not catching some of those teams at the top. And now you got to play your way through on the road. And, I mean, Jason, do you trust this team to put that kind of run together?
No, but at the same time, I wouldn't want to play them in the playoffs.
No.
I wouldn't want to get them in my side of the draw.
That's a bad first-round matchup.
Yeah. Somebody's going to get them. If they're a 6th seed and the Knicks are 3rd, I mean, do you want to see that team if you're the Knicks? Absolutely not. Kurt Helin's hanging out with us, Pro Basketball Talk at NBCSports.com. We'll come back with him, get into a couple other top stories around the league. Don't go anywhere. Coming up in 10 minutes, something to consider. Sammy Arnell will return. Bryce James making a decision on where he's going to play his college basketball. Where is he taking his talents? We'll talk about it. Also, Pro Bowl rosters announced on Thursday morning for the NFL. One name noticeably absent. We'll get to that. Continuing the conversation on the NBA with our friend Kurt Helin of Pro Basketball Talk at NBCSports.com, who hangs out with us. Boy, I mean, here you are, the Detroit Pistons, and finally things are starting to go right. You're actually in the play-in right now. If you're the Pistons, they've had some good marquee wins this year. And then Jaden Ivey. And people are watching it on the screen right now. You got to feel for Jaden Ivey.
He's
diving
really
for
had,
a loose ball. He fractures his fibula. Was it fracture or break?
Break. Full displaced.
Oh, God.
So, yeah, that's
it just
obviously
breaks
done
your
for the
heart.
rest of the season.
It just breaks your heart.
It does, because he's really had a year where breakout might be a strong word, but he's shown he can be the guy next to Cade Cunningham. Cade Cunningham has played like an all-star, and Jaden Ivey is playing off of him like 17 points a game, knocking down threes. The big 4-point play the other day in Sacramento it was in Sacramento or Philadelphia, wherever it was, to win the game, like 4-point play to win the game. He has really had his fantastic season, and for it to end this way is brutal for him, and it's just rough for a Pistons team that, like you said, I mean, they were the worst team in the NBA like 3 years running.
Oh, yeah.
And finally putting some stuff together this year. They're looking better. They're taking a step forward, and this just a punch to the gut.
What do you do as an organization in that spot if you are, a team that's contending for a play-in spot? I mean, do you make a move? Do you just chalk it up to bad luck and it's another lost season because you know how important he is to what that team does? I mean, what do you do if you're management there?
I don't think you do anything rational because you're still trying to build something long term. So they're not giving away future picks of quality for something. If they can get somebody off of the buyout market or something, they'll consider it. Like you said, they'd like to make the play-in. They'd like to kind of take that step forward and get these guys some experience in some sort of postseason setting, but they're also they're not taking the train off the track to do it.
There's a lot of really bad in the East right now, Kurt. Yeah. I mean, the Wizards, the Hornets, the Raptors, the Nets in sell mode. We know what's been going on with the Sixers. I mean, the East is wow right now.
Yeah, the Sixers are actually playing better of late, but yes, it's the bottom of that. The bottom of that conference is a race to Cooper Flag. They are all trying to capture the Cooper Flag, and it's going to be. Look, there's going to be a bunch of teams at the bottom trying to get into that mix and hoping for a little lottery luck. It's not just him, obviously. Ace Bailey's out there, but he might not be. He might fall to 4 or 5. I keep hearing people are not really high on how his offseason has gone, and he has not looked as good as the guy on his own team and Dylan Harper.
I want to talk to you about Mike Brown, but I got to talk about our friends at Credit Associates for a couple of minutes here. What a game last night for Karl Anthony Towns. You might have heard us talking about it in the last segment. 31 points, 21 boards. First Knick to do that, by the way, since the guy above me, Patrick Ewing, did it twice in a season. Karl Anthony Towns has done it twice this year. Ewing did it multiple times as well as the Knicks get a win over the Jazz. Dominant from start to finish for Cat. He simply did it all. Just like Cat taking it to the rim, if your credit card debt has been blocking your financial freedom, it's time to break through. Credit Associates can help you slam down your debt for up to half of what you owe. Half. It's the kind of move you want to see in your financial game. Don't wait for another quarter. Call 1-800-747-5362 today and see how much you can save. Credit Associates. When it's time to make a play, they've got your back. To see if you qualify for debt relief, just call 1-800-747-5362 or visit creditassociates.com or simply scan the QR code that you see on your screen and get all that information. All right, Kurt, Mike Brown. I mean, there have been a lot of coaches outspoken around the league about the way this situation was handled by the Sacramento Kings. Now, there's been subsequent reporting. The team was trying to make moves, trying to deal some guys before ultimately deciding to part ways with Mike Brown. How badly does this move sort of set back the organization right now? Does Doug Christie have a shot to win that job long term?
He has a shot, but let's get into this for a second because
sure.
You touched on a key thing first. They tried to make roster moves. They realized that the roster isn't where it needs to be. But when failing to find a deal that they like, they're like, well, we got to do something. Let's fire the coach is about the most Kings thing you can do. Doug Christie comes in and he is 2-1, although one of those wins is against a Dallas team without Luka or Kyrie that night. And then Philadelphia, for all we've kind of talked up how they're playing better, they didn't score in the final 3.5 minutes of that game and blew a lead. Like they blew it as much as credit to Kings for coming on. But we'll see if he can do this job. But if you were, look, there's factions within that organization and power structures fighting each other sometimes. And if you were somebody who was in the anti-Doug Christie group, you might give him this job for the rest of the year and then say, look, we didn't really do much with it any better than Brown. If we're going to fire Brown, we can't retire him. Like, there could be some of that going on. This is a situation that didn't sit well with people outside the league, and it didn't seem to sit well with De'Aaron Fox. And that's your bigger concern.
I only got about 10 seconds here, but to me, it feels like the problems with this organization are built as much around roster construction as it is anything.
Roster construction's the bigger problem. The biggest one may be the guy who owns the team.
We'll get into that next time with Kurt Helin of Pro Basketball Talk at NBCSports.com. Thank you, my friend. We'll see you next week.
Take care.
We're coming back. Take it to segment 5 on this Thursday edition of Sports Wrap. Odds and ends will wrap it up in 10 minutes. Could be the end for a future Hall of Famer. Get into that. Something to consider, Sam Yarnell. Something to consider, Sam Yarnell, on this Thursday edition of the show. Something to consider. Bryce James has made his decision. The second son of LeBron James has announced his decision to go to Arizona to play his college football. He's taken his talents to Arizona. Made the announcement yesterday. I think it was yesterday. Maybe it was the day before. I don't know. But Bryce James, who a lot of people project as potentially being better than Bronny James. And I'll tell you, I've watched some of the highlights, and what I see out of Bryce James is really impressive. And I think in a lot of regards, he is set up far more for success than Bronny is. It's always harder being the first one to come out and try to make your own mark. And obviously, Bronny got some help from his father, because I don't think he would have been drafted had the Lakers not drafted him late in the second round. But Bryce James decides to go to Arizona. What did you make of the decision?
Cool. The reporting on this, to me, is very similar to Herb Street's son going to Michigan or whatever it was.
Ohio State, I think, right?
No.
Oh, did he go to Michigan?
Flipped from Ohio State to Michigan.
You're right.
By the way, and not to get off topic, but on that really quick, because I know a lot of people it's a preferred walk-on. If you're thinking of that as anything besides Michigan trying to stick up a certain finger at Ohio State by hiring by bringing in one of their most famous quarterbacks' sons as a preferred walk-on, that's all it is. When Bronny came out, not when Bronny came out, when Bronny left Sierra Canyon to go to USC, the prevailing narrative was, it doesn't really matter what Bronny does, Bryce is going to be a lot better. In the years since then, it turns out Bryce actually isn't a lot better. The numbers at Sierra Canyon are reminiscent of Bronny's, but that's not really that concerning because they're not bad numbers. Sierra Canyon, pretty decent competition. But where you're really going to see the most competition in the youth basketball circuits, as I'm sure some of the viewers know, are these AAU tournaments, specifically tournaments like the EYBL, Nike's Elite Youth Basketball League. It's a tour that goes around the country. They play tournaments all over the place, and Bryce James looked horrible in it. Like mediocre man's mediocre. And that's... Star players get offers from more schools than Ohio State, Duquesne, and Arizona. three programs that are desperately trying to rebuild their basketball programs and doing just about anything it takes, clearly. My expectations for Bryce James are no higher than they were for Bronny. I really don't see a world where this kid will come. Maybe in college he does a lot better, sure. But I can't comprehend a world or a manner in which this kid takes that leap to the NBA that we've seen a player of his same archetype, not same size, but same gene line, right? Already have incredibly compromised success in the G League, let alone the actual league. So I get that it's going to get a lot of clicks, and that's why we got to report on it. But at the end of the day, Jason, it just feels like another one of these nepotistic offers, which in the world of sports has become paramount in this new era in which we live.
Everybody wins out of it. You know, Arizona gets the attention. They'll obviously be able to charge more for tickets. They don't have to worry about attendance.
They'll bring in
Everybody
some fancy transfers because people want to play with LeBron's son.
Absolutely. For what, a year? Maybe two?
Yeah, right. Exactly.
Maybe two. But I'll be interested to see his development at that next level. That's where we can talk about what he's doing right now at Sierra Canyon and all that stuff. It's all great. How he continues to develop, I think, is going to be the question. And we don't know the answer to that yet. So it's hard to project ultimately. I know you mentioned that tournament and playing against that competition and how he played, but ultimately, I think the story is still yet to be written on this. I'll wait and wait to hold judgment on it. Real quick, Pro Bowl rosters came out on Thursday morning. Noticeably absent, a guy that everybody likes to talk about as the best quarterback in football, and Patrick Mahomes, not selected to the AFC roster. 9 Ravens did make the game, including Lamar Jackson and Derrick Henry. It's the Pro Bowl. Sam Yarnell, so just kind of go, yeah.
So, yes, it is. But there are so many things here that I want to unpack.
First
of all, they didn't elect Patrick Mahomes. Yeah, you're right, because everyone like you and I we know he's going to be playing in the Super Bowl. What's the point of even putting him in the game? He's not going to be eligible for it anyway. This Pro Bowl roster release, and I got to be quick here, should have cemented Josh Allen's MVP case. I mean, my goodness, if you're looking at it any other way than Josh Allen is the clear-cut MVP, the Pro Bowl roster is exactly why. Look at the offense in the AFC. There are 4 Baltimore Ravens outside of Lamar Jackson. You know how many players there are from the Bills on the AFC's offense besides Josh Allen? 1, and it's an offensive lineman. The Ravens have their running back, wide receiver 1, and fullback on that roster. Josh Allen's your MVP.
We'll tell you his odds to win the MVP coming up in a couple of minutes in odds and ends. Could it be the last time we see a future Hall of Fame quarterback? We'll get to that too next. All right, just about time to put the wraps on this baby for a Thursday. Don't forget, Friday, Robert Littal is here, Black Sports Online founder. Talk about the top stories of the week. Week 18 NFL Page versus the Prince. We'll have that for you as well. All sorts of fun and frivolity. Recap of the Notre Dame Georgia Sugar Bowl matchup in New Orleans too. But without any further delay, Sam Yarnell, time for some odds and ends. Odds and ends, Sam Yarnell. Is it the end for Aaron Rodgers? He will start this weekend for the New York Jets. But will it be the last time we see Aaron Rodgers on a football field? I mean, truly odds and ends. This is truly potentially the end for Aaron Rodgers, Sam Yarnell. And I find myself kind of, I've bounced around back and forth on whether or not this does wind up being his last game. Here's what I'll say. If everything I saw Aaron say in that Enigma documentary that was on Netflix, if everything I saw him say in that documentary that I was forced to watch because I had to write a column on it for MSNBC, 3 hours of my life I'll never get back. Half kidding. There were some interesting things. If everything he says in that documentary is true, this is his last game. If he is truly at peace with himself and has nothing left to prove, then he finishes that game, goes into some dark, tunnel or something for a couple of weeks, comes out, sees his shadow like the groundhog, and says, I'm done. I'm retiring. If all of that is true, then this will be his last game on Sunday. What do you think?
I meant to tell you this. On one of our off days, I was aimlessly scrolling, and obviously, the content space on this last week has been very dry. Everyone takes vacation between Christmas and New Year's in the content space. So there was nothing else on, literally nothing. I went from watching a Chinese ping pong match on YouTube over to Netflix, and I turned on Enigma, and I didn't make it through 15 minutes. We got to minute 12, and I was like, nope, and I'm not doing this. I'm not wasting 3 hours of my life on this. Turned it off, turned on. By the way, off the sports subject for a second, Kings of Tupelo, great new series out on Netflix. It's wonderful. It's a docu-series. Tremendous. To the Aaron Rodgers
This is why we're going to spend the whole segment on Aaron Rodgers, by the way. Thank you.
To the Aaron Rodgers thing.
Inside joke.
He doesn't have his fastball anymore.
No.
I think that's very clear. I don't know how to put this nicely. The problem with Aaron Rodgers is that he kind of figured out how to manipulate the media just a little too late, because now he's full force in this media, I don't know, what are we going to call it, campaign that he's been running for the last 3-4
Rewriting the narrative,
years.
yeah.
But the last 2 years have been, obviously, hands down, no question, the worst in his career in a year where he wasn't sitting behind Brett Favre. That's the simple reality of the fact, or the simple reality of the situation. These are the 2 worst seasons of his career, and the worst 2-year stretch of his career since he was sitting behind Brett Favre on the bench in Green Bay. The answer is, to me, Aaron Rodgers can come back as a backup to a young quarterback.
He won't do that.
Right. We know he won't because we know his personality. But that is the route that makes the most sense. Do kind of what Brett Favre tried to do. Or retire. And quite frankly, the latter is what's going to happen.
Look, I think it's simple. I don't think anybody's going to want him, Sam. I think anybody who's watched this circus over the last 2 years, combined with how he's played, I'll just simplify this. All of what you said makes sense, but I think if you're an NFL team, what are you getting? What are you getting? Is there a spot where he makes sense, where a team's in a transition mode? Maybe they have maybe they go and draft a quarterback that isn't ready to play today. I just don't see any scenario that right now makes sense for Aaron Rodgers. I just don't. The Giants? I don't know. I just, for a year, I just don't see it. But time will tell. We only have a minute. And I promised I would not make this entire segment about Aaron Rodgers. So that means I'm going to give 45 seconds to Josh Allen, who is your favorite to win the MVP right now at minus 400. Followed by Lamar Jackson at plus 230. So what you're saying is there's still a chance, based on what happens this weekend, I guess, for Lamar Jackson, although I think it's Josh Allen's award at this point. Joe Burrow is plus 3,000, so 30-1. Saquon Barkley is 40-1 as we head into the final week of the season, Sam.
Bear in mind that Josh Allen is still sitting pretty at that minus 400, which, by the way, over the course of this week, since last NFL weekend, has only gotten longer. I believe it was minus 350 at last check on Monday.
Yeah.
So that's only gotten longer in a game where the book already knows Josh Allen isn't going to play. The Bills are 2.5-point favorites on the road in New England. That is a Mitch Trubisky line. That is not a Josh Allen line.
Yep.
Seems to me like the award's pretty locked up,
Yeah,
Jason.
I'd agree. That's going to put the wraps on us for this Thursday. We're back on Friday. Sugar Bowl recap. Robert Littal. Thanks to Kurt Helin. Thanks to you, Sam. We'll see you all back here on Friday for another edition of Sports Wrap.